Years ago, I was in a party. Everyone was talking together about their first time, telling each other how great it was. I was embarrassed of the fact that I had never actually touched it before. I tried to move away from the conversation so that nobody could find out I was still inexperienced, but then he had to open his mouth.
Hey potties, tell us about your last time.
Chad. I hated his guts. I'm saving myself until I get a new computer, I answered and left the room. But it was a lie. They all knew it. They must think I'm weird now, I thought, and I was so embarrassed. Then suddenly, the girl who owned the house followed me to the kitchen.
I think what you said was sweet.
She told me. Thanks, I answered.
I like guys who want their first time to be special. It's kind of romantic. I have a PC upstairs if you want to try it.
I was speechless. She then took my hand and guided me upstairs. It was breathtaking. GeForce 6800 Ultra with AMD Athlon 64. It was the computer people in NASA used to play Unreal Tournament. She handed me the CD and quietly whispered,
Hope you can handle 60 frames per second.
I was getting so nervous that I had trouble putting it in. I started panicking and blurted out, Do you have McAfee antivirus? I don't want to do it without protection, I told her. And left. I don't know why I did it. I guess my anxiety just got a hold of me. If only I knew at that time that to finally finish the game, it would take me another 20 years. And here we are in the distant future of 2023. The reason I'm making this video is actually because I went through my old hard drives and I happened to find an old Half-Life 2 save of mine from almost 20 years ago. And I just decided like, hey, I never played the game. I started it, booted it up, jumped on the train a bit and quit it and never played it. I don't really have a good reason why I did it. I guess I had other games to play at that time. And then when time went on, I just kind of never got into it. But now after 20 years, I found the save. I thought it would be cool to finally play it through and kind of compare how does the Half-Life 2 compare to games of today. I installed Half-Life 2, copied my old save and started from where I left off.
Nice.
Even though it had been quite a long time, it wasn't hard to remember what I was doing previously, since I had done pretty much nothing in the game. Installed it, stepped out of the first train, saved and quit. I planned to play through the game, but that just never happened. You may ask why, but the answer is quite simple. Counter-Strike Source. Counter-Strike Source was bundled with Half-Life 2, and I've always been bigger into online games, which is why I have 12,000 hours in Dota 2 in just one of my Steam accounts. I got a Smurfs 2 for those times when I want to feel like a man and go dunk on people who have actual lives and girlfriends, and thus don't have time to play Dota 12 hours a day like myself. On top of this, I don't really even want to think how much playtime I have on World of Warcraft and RuneScape. So when Half-Life 2 was released with Counter-Strike Source, I naturally gravitated towards Counter-Strike and completely forgot about Half-Life 2. Every single day when I came back home, I joined public CS Source servers which had the all talk option enabled, meaning you could talk with everyone on the server. It was one of the first games to implement a working voice chat, and this was actually before Skype was really even a thing. I mean, sure there was Ventrilo, but it cost money to run those servers, so only prestigious WoW guilds had the access to those. CS Source was one of the only places in the internet that had free access to online voice chat, and on top of that you could play the game itself, and of course, trash talk your enemies.
Are you kidding me? It's the second time he's giving me such a headshot.
Honestly, I can't even begin to explain how amazing it was to go from RuneScape, which looked like this, to this. I made friends and I made enemies, and the years just went by. And no matter how many people kept telling me how awesome Half-Life 2 was, I just always kept thinking that, nah, eventually I'll play it. Which ended up being true, since even though it is 20 years after the release, this counts as eventually, right? So as you can see, I am not a liar, except when I write 6 feet and 6 inches to my bio. I don't really have a good reason why I'm doing the playthrough now, other than it was just time, I guess. Just like it is time for you to subscribe. Immediately when I started jumping around in the game, I was hit with a wave of nostalgia. The Source engine just feels really good even today. All those hours of CS Source really had played off, since already at the beginning part of the game, where you're supposed to put the can in the trash, I was able to do the biggest trick shot since. No, get the camera! The guard didn't seem to appreciate the 3-pointer and kept chasing me around, so I made sure to show him that I can hit a target from close too. Even today, playing with the physics in Half-Life 2 just feels great, which is why I feel like we should talk a little bit more about the engine. Now, I don't know much about video games, I just waste my life away playing them, so I can't really talk about the lighting, shaders and all the jazz in this game, but there were still 2 distinct things even a mouth-breather modern gamer like myself noticed. The first one being the surround sound in the game.
But we have farm-raised head crabs, because, Mr. Freeman, their meat is so delectable.
Sure, it's commonplace today, but it wasn't really at that time when the game came out, which was probably amazing at the time. But since we are here to compare this to modern games, I can't really put my finger on the reason why, but for some reason I really noticed it clearly this time. Maybe it's because this game doesn't have too much noise pollution like modern games, so it was just easier to notice those sounds coming from certain directions. And maybe also my old Counter-Strike habits woke up and I was just like listening to the enemy footsteps more than usual. But whatever the reason is, I was simply impressed by the small addition to the game. And then there is the big thing. I'd say probably the reason why this whole game was made and why it still has the reputation that it has. And that is the physics. The world in Half-Life 2 feels real. It makes you feel like you are in an environment. The fact that you can interact with objects, jump on things and throw things is the heart and soul of this game. Even by today's standards, it just feels really good. I mean, how many games do we have where it feels like you are interacting with the environment? I can think of like, I don't know, Crysis and Skyrim maybe. I'm sure there are more, but so many games today might have amazing graphics and even story, but it still feels like you're playing an interactive movie rather than you being actually there and shaping the world around you. Over the years, I've probably played 100 different Korean MMOs because I was always looking for that next addiction, but none of them could even come close to World of Warcraft. Why? I mean, sure, World of Warcraft was just simply better in almost everything, but one of the key reasons, to me at least, has always been that in World of Warcraft you can jump on things. Sure, it seems minor, but it just solidifies the world. Like, it makes the world really be there. You can interact with it. You see something and you start to wonder, how can I get up there? I mean, how many hours have we all jumped on Orgrimmar Bank roof, for example, trying to stay on the panels or just jumping on top of whatever bones these are? In this same vein, what makes Half-Life Alyx so much more real than other VR games? The simple fact that you can grab and throw anything. Or let's say, how about this hypothetical? You can choose between a beautiful holographic girlfriend projected in your house, which of course you can't interact with, or you're given this machine. Tell me in the comments, which one would you pick? The physics are also used very innovatively in the puzzles in Half-Life 2, and I don't know if I've ever played any other game that utilizes object physics like this in puzzles. I've always loved puzzles in video games, so these were really a big treat for me. Not to mention using the environment to wreak havoc and cheesing certain parts with makeshift barricades. The physics in this game were great, even by today's standards, but naturally they're not perfect. It felt like many objects were sharp-edged and bare-boned in the environment, causing things to go really jerky when interacted with. This happened especially quite a bit with the vehicle parts. But still, a jerky world is better than a lifeless world. The graphics. They look alright. I mean, sure, they look awesome for a 20-year-old game, especially compared to like San Andreas, for example, which also came in 2004. But by today's standards, Half-Life 2 doesn't look that great. The game went for realism at the time, which dated by today's standards. Stylized games like Wind Waker age a bit better since the cartoony look doesn't really age that much. The models and facial animations in Half-Life 2 look still completely acceptable, but what hurts the game is that the environments just look empty. Every area you go in feels bare bones and has no life in it. Because of this, the world doesn't feel lived in, and I don't really feel like there's anything to gain by looking around. I actually got slightly bored driving the speedboat because all I was doing was going through similar looking brown canals for 30 minutes. The environment just feels like going through a tunnel, and in my mind it could have used more items and things around to make it more visually pleasing. Or crafted places where a room, for example, conveys a story. If I recall correctly, Skyrim, for example, had items and skeletons in places which clearly told a hidden story of sorts, about what they were doing and how they got there and died. And whoa, before you pull out your pitchforks, don't forget, I'm judging the game by today's standards. The game still looks better than even the 2021 San Andreas remake, for example, so at least we have that.
Hey, Gordon! The Citadel's on full alert. I've never seen it lit up like that.
Story. If you're scared of spoilers, don't worry, I won't spoil anything. Because honestly, there's not much of a story to spoil. The whole game, you're basically just trying to get from point A to point B, but just something keeps coming up, so you have to take detours.
Gordon, you need to get out of here. I can't leave my father.
Now, a game doesn't need to have a story to be good. Super Mario 64 is my favorite game of all time, and the story in that is pretty simple. Mario just wants to f Peach, but she's being f***ed by a lizard, so Mario has to out-alpha the lizard by calling it gay. In Half-Life 2, while you're running around, multiple mysteries get set up, and a mystery is not good unless the revelation that mystery is good. I learned this the hard way when I was a young boy and a fancy Hollywood producer named Alex Kurtzman lured me in to take a look at his thing. It's easy to write a mystery, but writing a satisfying conclusion is the challenge, and the TV show Lost really taught me that. This is why today I've grown up to be skeptical of mysteries in TV shows, movies and games. I will not get baited by a good mystery anymore, and Half-Life 2 is full of interesting story elements that simply are just not fully revealed in the game. So who knows if the answers are satisfying or not.
You've done so well, in fact, that I've received some interesting offers for your services.
I guess I'd need to play the DLC or read the comic books and maybe watch Half-Life 2 explained YouTube videos to get the full grasp of what's going on. But the thing is, I'm a busy adult. I'd rather be learning languages.
Okay? Shut the fuck up, moron! Putang ina mo! Bobo! Bobo! Stupid! Putang ina mo! You died!
Or watching cinema. But as I said before, a game doesn't need a story to be good, so in my mind, having a limited story doesn't make it any worse, but it also doesn't make it any better. What makes Half-Life 2 better though, is the gameplay. Playing Half-Life 2 to me was like getting back with that ex-girlfriend. She remembers what you liked, so she's gonna give you a good time. That's right, I've had a girlfriend. Her name was Misaki-chan, and I found her from the trash. Shooting in the game just felt really good, and all the weapons were different enough, though the shotgun ended up being a bit overpowered. When it comes to enemies, there's the Stormpoopers, the Diapers, and the Constipated. All these enemies in these categories are very similar to each other, meaning that there is essentially 3 enemy types. They have minor differences with each other, but honestly, they are so minor that they don't really matter. I'm sure some of you are already rage posting about how there's many more enemies and whatever, but the other enemies are so far in between that you don't really see them enough for it to count. The only other one you see often are these flying f***ers, but I don't really even want to think about them anymore. They were more annoying than my mother cleaning in Saturday morning. I also noticed you have to deal with all the enemies in the same fashion. Shoot them until they die. Meaning there isn't really much variation when it comes to them. Since the gunplay is fun, I don't have a big trouble with this, but it definitely would have made the game more interesting if they had those age-old differences, such as one of them only being vulnerable when shot to the head, or that you need to defeat them with specific weapons or something. You know, to make the game a bit more tactical in that sense. I also would have enjoyed real bosses. Sure, there were a couple, which were nice to have, but those two you just had to shoot them until they died. Once again, since there were puzzles in the game, it would have been interesting to combine the bosses and puzzles, for example, in a way that in order to make the boss vulnerable, you have to do something and then shoot it. You know, the classic video game thing. I mean, really, the best tactic on beating the helicopter was to literally stand still and shoot it with the unlimited ammo of the boat. It just wasn't very satisfying. Also, while I'm talking about the helicopter fight, I'll also say that I love that the game was conservative with the music, meaning that it was rare and when it did come up, it was awesome. Though I wish the music did come up a little more often, like the chopper boss fight here didn't have any music, and I feel like having a song play here during the boss fight would have given it this oomph. Much more than listening to the farting of the speedboat. It might sound like I got gripes with the game, but that's not really true. By today's standards, Half-Life 2 is not perfect, but it's still a very good game. Even though the world feels a bit empty and the enemies are there just to be shot at, the puzzles, gunplay and movement are as good today as they ever were, and easily outperform many modern games. I had a lot of fun trying to run through the game fast because the movement was great and the game allowed me to play it at my own style, like get boosted by the enemies and do sick dodges with the vehicles because I had no HP and didn't want to reload to an earlier save like a pussy.
Another one.
Though my epic speedrun was stopped multiple times to listen to the NPCs do their dialogue, but at least during those times I could play around with the items while waiting for the event to be over.
What the fuck?
I had fun playing through the game and I'm glad I finally did it, even though it took me 20 years. The game is still incredibly solid today, but if I had to think, would I recommend this to a Fortnite zoomer over like, you know, Elden Ring? That is a hard question. It's hard to think of this game separately and compare it to modern games because Half-Life 2 influenced everything we have today so much. But if it had never existed and came out today right now on Steam, I still think people would give it a solid 7.5 out of 10. Or at least that's the number that keeps popping in my head. So if you haven't played it yet, go play it, it's fun. And if you have, go play it, it's fun. Now all we can hope for is that when Half-Life 3 eventually comes out in 2045 by Activision Valve, they write a satisfying conclusion to the mysteries that were set up in this game. Huge thanks for watching this video. I hope you can forgive me for it and subscribe for more content in the future. Oh, and before I go, I just remembered about the ladders. F them. 7 out of 10.